Hi and welcome to another story, and today we have part 7 of Hetty Feather by Jacqueline Wilson, continuing from chapter 14. Christmas was coming, but I didn't know whether to get excited. I asked Harriet how it was celebrated at the hospital. Christmas is rather like a special day, she said, which depressed me utterly. I hated the long cold hours in chapel. I'd started to hate Sunday dinner too. I still simpered so that the ladies and gentlemen would give me sweets, but the big girls were wise to me now and stole them all from me the moment I stepped outside the dining room. I tried looking to Harriet for protection, but she had developed a ridiculous passion for one of the younger gentlemen visitors and hung back, blushing and smiling, frequently the very last foundling out of the dining room. He wore a gold tie pin in the shape of a pea, so Harriet spent hours, entire hours, wondering if he was a Philip, a Peter or a Paul. I think I heard his wife calling him Peregrine. I fibbed, making up the silliest name I could think of. Nonsense, Hetty, and that lady isn't his wife. She's far too old, years and years older than him. She might even be his brother, though I rather think she is the older spinster sister. She was a very plain, pale, serious-seeming lady who always wore plain charcoal grey dresses with no adornments, so perhaps Harriet was right. She certainly seemed convinced he was fancy-free and conducting a full-scale flirtation with her, though, as far as I could see, he didn't so much as glance in her direction. But she was happy to dream. With all the ladies and gentlemen gawp at us when we eat our Christmas dinner too, will they? I said. Oh, yes, said Harriet happily, and they will be in the chapel for the Christmas service with the choir and the tableau vivant. What's a tableau vivant? I asked. Oh, it's very pretty. A representation of the Nativity. I hope each year that I might get picked as Mary. I would so love to play the Virgin Mary in all her holiness with everyone gazing, especially him. I know all about the Nativity. Every Christmas time, Mother hung up a big picture of baby Jesus in the manger with all his visitors adorning him. So, is this tableau vivant like a play? There are no words, Hetty, and you have to keep very still. It's like a living picture. This wasn't such good news. It didn't sound as if anything happened. I longed for drama, angels proclaiming at the tops of their voices, innkeepers turning away the holy couple, wise men processing with their exotic gifts. How do we know who is who if no one moves or says anything? I said. Don't be so silly. They wear special costumes. Mary has a beautiful dress of brilliant blue and a long white veil, said Harriet, sighing wistfully. Imagine. Oh, I could imagine. I suddenly understood. Harriet had been wearing an ugly brown dress and a ridiculous cap since she was 5 years old. I do hope you get to be Mary, I said, or if not, perhaps I could be Mary. My heart beat fast at the thought. I pictured myself in that blue dress, felt the soft bright silk on my arms, the long veil brushing past my shoulders. Oh, Hetty, said Harriet, and I saw she was trying not to laugh. You're much too little, and you have red hair. I was rather put out by this. Harriet was meant to be my friend. I could stand on a box, and my hair wouldn't show much underneath my veil, I said, a little sulkily. However, I had another idea. Or, as I am really little, perhaps I could be baby Jesus. I could crouch inside a box and be like baby Jesus in the manger. This time Harriet couldn't help laughing heartily. You're so comical, Hetty. You couldn't possibly pass as Jesus. No, they have a real baby, one of the new foundling babes from the nurseries. Last year it cried so loudly that it almost drowned out the singing of the choir. I could do that. I'm very good at crying, I said. Who chooses the children for the tableau vivant? I'm not sure, said Harriet. Perhaps the matrons and the nurses? I had no chance at all if matron Pig-Faced Peters had any say. But dear Nurse Winnie, well, she would surely put in a good word for me. Or maybe it's the teachers, said Harriet. Aha, Miss Newman was too strict a teacher to have obvious favourites, but we all knew she favoured Polly and me because we were the cleverest. Perhaps she would pick both of us. I thought hard about costumes. I did not wish to be a shepherd or a guest at the inn. Their costumes would be very commonplace. But the wise men would surely wear fine gowns of velvet and brocade, and if they were kings, they should have golden crowns on their heads. Oh, Harriet, we could be the 3 wise men, I said. You could be the big one, and you could be the first to bow down to baby Jesus and give him a big present. And then Polly could be the middle-sized wise man and give a middle-sized present. And then I could come last to be a teeny-tiny wise man with a very teeny-tiny present. Harriet laughed so hard that tears rolled down her cheeks. It's not Goldilocks and the 3 Bears, Hetty. You're so funny. And besides, we are girls, so we only play the lady parts. The boys always play the wise men. But that isn't fair. I reckoned it up, counting on my fingers. There are heaps and heaps of men parts. There's only 2 lady parts, Mary and the innkeeper's wife, unless is an angel a man or a lady? Harriet did not look sure. I think an angel can be either, she said. Then I could be an angel, wear a long white nightgown. Oh, and I could have wings, great feathery wings. Do you think I could have wings that really fly? Pigs might fly before they let you be an angel, Hetty, said Harriet. Everyone knows and says how fierce and bad you are. And you fidget so. You could never be part of a tableau vivant where you have to stand still throughout the entire service. Now stop plaguing me about the tableau vivant. Tell me, did you happen to notice the exquisite cravat my gentleman was wearing this morning? But I was in a sulk and did not want to discuss Philip, Peter, Paul, Peregrine. I didn't care if he was choked by his own exquisite cravat. I just wanted to be in the tableau vivant. I told Polly all about it that night. We could both be angels, Polly. Well, perhaps not the big special angel who tells the wise men about Jesus. Gabriel, said Polly. Yes, that one. But there are lots of other angels, the hymn says, a host of heavenly angels, and I'm sure a host means a great deal, so we could be small angels, baby ones. Cherubs, said Polly. Yes, cherubs. I thought back to the nativity picture at home. There were definitely cherubs at the nativity. They were up at the corners, flying above the stable, but they didn't have any clothes on, just little wisps. We would have to wear clothes, Hetty, Polly said firmly. But we weren't chosen to be angels, wisps or no wisps. Monica was picked to be a small angel. We were astonished. She was such a thin, colourless girl with very little personality. She just echoed everything Sheila said. Sheila seemed equally taken aback, convinced that she would make a far superior angel. She started to tease and torment Monica, but Monica didn't retaliate. She had become irritatingly holy since being chosen. You're making Jesus very unhappy calling me silly names and pinching me, Sheila, she declared. I shan't play with you any more until you say sorry. I'm not a bit sorry, said Sheila, marching off. I'd far sooner play by myself. She stood stamping her feet and glowering in a corner of the playground, while Monica smiled in a maddeningly saintly way and struck angelic poses. I walked arm in arm with Polly past Sheila and felt almost sorry for her. A truly kind child would have invited Sheila to walk with us, but I'm afraid I am only kind when I want to be. I definitely tried to be kind to my real friends. I decided I wanted to give a Christmas present to Polly, to Harriet, to Nurse Winterson, and to Ida. I did not have any money apart from Jem's precious sixpence, safely hidden inside the knob of my bedhead. I did not have an opportunity to go shopping in any case. I had not been outside the grounds of the hospital since arriving. This meant I had to make my presents. I certainly wasn't a competent needlewoman. Besides, I had no materials, but I was an opportunistic thief. I was sent in disgrace to Matron Peter's room for cheeking one of the nurses. While standing there, being seriously scolded, I saw she had a Chinese bowl of dried lavender and rose petals on her little table. This gave me a wonderful idea. I edged nearer and nearer the bowl, my hands behind my back. When Matron Pigface consulted her punishment book to check just how many times I had been in trouble, I grabbed a big handful of dried flowers and stuffed them up my sleeve. I worried a little when I said my prayers at night, in case thieves went straight to hell, so I told God I was very sorry. But it didn't stop me snatching a torn apron from the mending basket the next day and hanging onto my needle and thread instead of handing them in to Nurse Winterson after our darning session. I made 4 little lavender sachets with my stolen snippets. I tried to fashion them into hearts, but they were woefully lumpy and lopsided. I wanted to sew long, loving messages on each, but I didn't have the skill or the time, so I simply stitched each name. Ida was mercifully short, and Polly was simple enough. Had to write Harriet in very tiny stitches, but even so her name had to wind around the edge of her heart. I could not possibly attempt Nurse Winterson in its entirety, and I was fast running out of time. So she had to make do with a hastily stitched N.W. She seemed delighted all the same, and kissed me on the cheek. Harriet kissed me too, and gave me her own presents. She had fashioned me a very little dolly out of scraps of wool. She was too small to cuddle close, so was no real substitute for my rag baby, but I was still very grateful and gave Harriet many kisses back. Polly had a present for me too, a pen. She had found a jay's feather in the playground and fashioned the end into a proper quill. I can't quite figure out how to get any ink, she said, a little anxiously. I would spill if I tried to smuggle some from the classroom inkwells. Never mind, Polly. I can write secret messages, secret stories in invisible ink, or perhaps I could prick my finger and write in blood, though it would have to be a very short story. But I love my quill pen. And I love my scented heart, said Polly, and we gave each other a fierce hug. Ida gave me a present too. I was rather hoping for one, but I thought it would be some delicious titbit, maybe another slab of toffee or a little iced cake. Here, Hetty, she whispered at Christmas Eve supper. Don't open it until tomorrow morning, though. She dropped a little square parcel in my lap. Definitely a cake. I thought, my mouth watering. I hoped it would have extra thick icing, and maybe yellow marzipan too, and a surplus of cherries. I was in such a greedy daze of anticipation, I almost forgot I had a present to give to Ida too. I fumbled up my sleeve, where I had hidden it. Are you looking for a handkerchief, Hetty? No, Where's it gone? I said, wriggling and scrabbling. Ida's present had gone right up my sleeve and down inside my dress. I tapped my front. There it was, a little lump above my own real heart. I edged it up towards the neck of my dress. Is it moving? Oh, dear Lord, have you got a mouse down your dress? Ida squealed, backing away from me. No, silly Ida, it's your present. You have a Christmas present for me, said Ida. Yes, shh, I said, peering round to make sure we weren't being observed. I scrabbled down my dress. Haven't got any fancy paper to wrap it with, so you will see what it is right this instant. Perhaps you can wrap it up yourself and try to forget what it is, and then when you open it on Christmas Day, it'll come as a splendid surprise, eh? I fished the lavender heart right out into the open. It had got squashed out of shape during its journey up and down my frock, and my stitches seemed very big and uneven. I offered it shyly, hoping Ida wouldn't laugh at my efforts. Ida didn't laugh. She cried. She stared at the crumpled heart in her hand, and tears welled in her eyes, spilling down her cheeks. Oh, Ida, don't cry. I'm sorry it's such a small and shabby present. I will try harder next year, I said earnestly. It's a wonderful present. So kind of you, Hetty. Oh, bless you, child, Ida mumbled, and then hurried away to the kitchen, forgetting her serving tray in her haste. Sheila glared at me. What have you done to make Ida cry, Hetty Feather? I've made her happy, I said stoutly, though I wasn't quite sure if this was true. I couldn't wait till Christmas morning to open my present from Ida. I got up in the middle of the night, clutching my precious small parcel. I tiptoed the length of the dormitory to the washroom. I knew where the nurses kept a candle and matches, in case a child was taken poorly in the night. I took the candle into a corner and lit it with a match. Then I sat down cross-legged and opened my parcel. It wasn't cake. It wasn't anything to eat at all. It was a tiny book, bound in red, with gilt lettering. The story of Thumbelina. I opened it up with trembling fingers. The story was about a very, very small girl called Thumbelina, and there were coloured illustrations. I saw Thumbelina with pink cheeks and very yellow hair, tucked up neatly in a brown walnut shell bed. I stroked her hair and patted her tiny quilt, and then read the first few pages, though I had to squint in the candlelight, and it was fearfully cold in the dank washroom. Dear Ida, she had chosen the smallest book she could find, so I could hide it easily about my person. Thumbelina was even smaller than me, yet she was the heroine of her fairy tale, and when I peeked at the ending, I saw she lived happily ever after. I was frozen solid when I eventually stole back to bed, but glowing inside, warmed by Ida's loving generosity. At breakfast, I waited until she came to serve us our porridge, and then I grabbed hold of her hand tightly. Thank you, Ida, I said passionately. I do love you so. The other girls giggled, thinking I was simply thanking Ida for my porridge, but Ida understood. She gave my bowlful an extra sprinkling of brown sugar and patted my shoulder, smiling all the while. I marched off to chapel feeling very happy. For once I sat through the long, long service without fidgeting, because I had the wondrous nativity tableau vivant to gaze at. The participating children kept still as statues. Even the newborn babe in the cardboard manger slept peacefully throughout. Mary was one of the big girls in Harriet's class, thin and dark and a little gawky, but strangely graceful now. She knelt before the baby, hands clasped in awe, her beautiful bright blue dress draped decorously about her. Joseph was one of the big lads, tall as a man, splendid in his orange-striped robe. The shepherds were arranged artistically on the left, some standing, some kneeling. There were even a stuffed sheep and the smallest shepherd clutched by a toy lamb. The 3 wise men paraded on the right, wearing large gold crowns studded with glass jewels. Each boy sported a long false beard to show they were very old and very wise. How I longed to have a beard too. Best of all, there were the angels, an entire flock of them, standing aloft upon the stable roof, in gauzy white with great feathery wings. Monica amongst them, pink and pious, her eyes raised upwards. There was one angel who seemed to be truly flying, dangling on a rope from the chapel rafters, his bare feet on the points of a silver star, the most wondrous angel, with a halo illuminating his dark curls. You'll never guess who it was. My own little brother, suspended in mid-air, his arms gesturing gracefully, his toes pointed, dancing down from heaven. It's Gideon, I whispered proudly to Polly. My brother Gideon. I felt I could sit there in the chapel forever. I was so happy for Gideon, and so relieved that he was well and making such a grand job of this angel acting. I glowed with pride when I heard the ladies and gentlemen talking as we ate our Christmas dinner afterwards. Bless the children, they looked so splendid in the tableau vivant. They kept so still, even the tiny ones. The little boy angel was by far the best. Oh, I agree, a true little angel up there in mid-air. I nudged Polly, and happily munched my way through my roast goose and my plum pudding. We each had an orange too. Some of us little ones were inexperienced orange eaters, and tried to bite into the bright dimpled skin. I might have done the same because we never had oranges at the cottage, but I watched Polly and copied her as she peeled the skin away and divided her orange into segments. We had no official presents as such, but when we lifted our mugs to take a drink, we discovered a brand new polished penny. I hid mine later on top of Jem's silver sixpence. I went to sleep that night with Polly's pen under my pillow, Harriet's doll tucked in beside me, and my tiny book clutched to my chest. Chapter 15. We were given an orange and a new penny the next Christmas, and the next, and the next, and the next. That was the worst thing of all about the hospital, the sheer sameness of every single day. If things did change, it always seemed to be for the worse. Harriet left the hospital to go into service as a nursery maid. She cried when she said goodbye, telling me she'd never care for any of her new nursery charges the way she cared for me. I missed her dreadfully. She had been so kind to me, and I'd loved sitting on her lap and being babied. Thank goodness I still had Polly. We moved into the upper school, into a different dormitory. Of course I remembered to transfer Jem's sixpence to my new bedpost. I had to say farewell to dear Nurse Winnie and Miss Newman. Thank goodness Ida could still serve me every day in the dining room, giving me illicit gifts of raisins and jam and knobs of butter when no one was watching. "How are you doing, Hetty?" she'd always ask. "I'm doing very well, Ida," I mostly said. I wasn't doing well. I was doing very badly. I didn't care for my new teacher, Miss Morley, and she certainly didn't care for me, or Polly either. Miss Newman had been strict, but she liked both of us. When we answered correctly or asked an interesting question, her eyes lit up behind her spectacles, and she seemed delighted to teach us. Miss Morley stopped asking us to answer questions because she knew we'd get them right, and this seemed to irritate her. "Don't sit there with that smug expression on your face, Hetty Feather. We all know you know the answer," she'd say, and she'd give a false yawn and encourage all the others to laugh at me. I couldn't help knowing the answers because our lessons didn't progress. We could mostly all read and write by now and do the simplest sums, and there we stuck, not working our way forward at all, going over the same dull facts again and again. There were maps all around our classroom wall, and I'd stare at the different countries and picture a flea-sized Hetty sailing across the blue sea and landing on each pink and yellow and green land. "Stop daydreaming, Hetty Feather, and attend to your dictation," Miss Morley snapped. "Can't you tell us a little about the countries on the map, Miss Morley? I wonder what it's like in great big Africa or India or Japan. Do the children do dictation there? Do they wear long dresses and caps, or do they wear short clothes, or maybe if it's very, very hot, no clothes at all?" The others sniggered, and Miss Morley flushed, though I hadn't meant to be impertinent. "Stop these ridiculous questions, Hetty Feather. You don't need to know the answers. It's not as if you're going to voyage to foreign parts. You're going to be a servant like all the other girls. You only need to write a decent hand, read a recipe, and add up your groceries correctly." I felt I needed to do so much more. I still hated the idea of being a servant. I feared I would be a very bad one. We were taught how to wash clothes and scrub floors now, helping out with all the household chores in the hospital. I hated getting hot and wet. It was so bored I distracted myself by telling stories in my head, not concentrating on the tedious housework. "Use some more elbow grease, Hetty Feather," they'd scream at me. "Watch what you're doing," they'd yell when I started and knocked over my pail of water. Polly was as bored as I was, particularly in lessons. She could not bear our arithmetic sessions because Miss Morley frequently made mistakes. Polly pointed out a simple subtraction error on the blackboard early on, waving her arm earnestly. "What is it, Polly Renfrew?" "I haven't finished the sum yet." I know, Miss Morley. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I don't think you've noticed that you've subtracted an 8 from a 3 and put the answer as 5. And yet you haven't borrowed 10 from the next line, so that 9 is incorrect," she said helpfully. She wasn't being impertinent. At this stage, she didn't realise that Miss Morley's grasp of arithmetic was extremely shaky. She thought she'd simply made a silly slip and would be grateful for her intervention. Grateful? Miss Morley flushed an ugly scarlet and rubbed the entire sum from the blackboard. "How dare you admonish me? Polly Renfrew, come out here." Polly stepped forward uncertainly. "Hold out your hand." Polly held it out politely, as if Miss Morley were going to shake it, but she seized her long ruler instead and went whack, whack, whack across Polly's soft, white hands. We all jumped. Our eyes stung. We'd been threatened with whippings and beatings many times in the infant school, but the only actual physical punishment any of us had received was an impatient tug on the ear or a light tap on the backs of our legs. This was a cruel assault. We could see the painful red wheals on Polly's palms. Polly's face crumpled and she started crying. I was beside myself. "How dare you hit her when she's done nothing wrong at all, you cruel, wicked woman," I cried, and I seized her ruler and hurled it into the corner of the classroom. The whole class gasped. I was a little shocked myself. I hadn't quite meant to say these words. They just spurted out of my mouth in a torrent. "Come here, Hetty Feather," Miss Morley said. I will not stand for this behaviour. I thought she would retrieve her ruler and beat me to within an inch of my life. I decided I would not cry like poor Polly. I would hold my head up high and be a brave, unflinching martyr. She could beat me 3 times, 6 times, even a dozen. She could beat my hands into a bloody pulp, but I would not murmur or shed a tear. I would stare back at her like a basilisk, wishing her dead. But she didn't beat me even once. She seized hold of me by the wrist, digging her nails in hard, and tugged me right out of the classroom. I thought she was simply standing me in the corridor, and decided I didn't mind in the least. I could just stand and picture the past in my own private daydream. But Miss Morley marched me right along the corridor. I realised she was taking me to matron. My heart started thudding then. The senior school matron made Pig-Faced Peters seem sweet as sugar. Matron Bottomley was thin and pinched, with a permanent pucker in her forehead. She had a big hooked nose like a beak, and always looked as if she'd like to peck you very hard. Matron Bottomley had already told me off several times for talking in corridors. She had chastised me for tearing my dress when I fell over playing tag. She had made me scrub a whole floor twice over because I'd left 1 or 2 slimy soap smears. Oh, how I wished Matron Bottomley had slipped on them and landed on her bony, stinking bottom. What might she do when she knew I'd shouted at a teacher, taken her ruler and thrown it away? I felt I might cry now, but I stared hard, scarcely daring to blink in case the tears started spilling. I was pushed unceremoniously into Matron Bottomley's room and forced to stand there in front of her while Miss Morley gave a highly exaggerated account of my rebellion. It was total insubordination, actual physical violence, Miss Morley declared dramatically, drops of spittle on her chapped lips. Matron Bottomley rose from her desk and looked me up and down. I started trembling, but I looked her up and down back, my fists clenched. I will not cry, I said inside my head. I will not cry. No matter what they do to me, I can bear it. Whatever it is, they cannot kill me. I will be brave. You're a child of Satan, Hetty Feather, said Matron Bottomley. You have his hell-red hair and his flaming temper. You must quench this devilish fire. You must be taught a severe lesson. I was so crazed with fear, I thought she meant a literal lesson. I dared to breathe out, because I knew I was always quick to learn, but this punishment had nothing to do with books. Take hold of her, Miss Morley, said Matron Bottomley. They each seized a wrist and pulled me to the door. They dragged me down the corridor. I thought they were taking me to the boys' wing. We'd heard fearful rumours that the baddest big boys were beaten with a cat-o'-nine-tails. Perhaps they were now going to whip me with this dreadful instrument. I gritted my teeth, though they were chattering now. But when we reached the grand staircase, they dragged me up, 1 flight of stairs and then another, right to the very top of the building, to a little attic room in the tower. They opened a door at the end. It was empty apart from an old blanket and a chamber pot. No, I cried. No, please, you can't put me in there. Oh, yes, we can, Hetty Feather. You stay here and pray to be a better girl, said Matron, and she thrust me inside. The door slammed shut, and I heard the sound of a key turning. I was locked in. I heard their footsteps retreating. Perhaps they were simply trying to frighten me. They would come back any minute. They couldn't leave me locked up in here. There was only one very small window, set high up in the wall. It had bars across, as if this was truly a prison. I tried jumping up, but could only catch a glimpse of sky. I was very small, but there was no way I could ever wriggle through those bars. And it was a sheer drop anyway. I tried hurling myself against the door, knocking all the breath out of my body. It held fast. I was truly a prisoner. Well, what do I care? I said aloud. I will show them. It's not so very dreadful to be locked in for an hour or two. They'll have to come back soon because it's nearly dinner time. Meanwhile, I shall amuse myself. I shall pretend I'm a princess locked up by 2 evil wicked witches in a tall tower. I pictured this determinedly, inventing a magnificent Prince Jem who climbed the tower and rescued me. We lived happily ever after in his wondrous kingdom, while the 2 witches were locked up in their own tower forever. I amused myself with this story for quite a while, but my stomach started rumbling. I could not hear the clock chiming from my isolated prison, but I was certain it was long past dinner time now. So, they intended to starve me, did they? Were they going to keep me locked up right until supper time? I kept staring at the chamber pot. It was clearly there to be used, so perhaps I truly was to be left for hours yet. I decided I would not sit on the pot, no matter what. It would be too humiliating for the contents to be inspected by Matron and Miss Morley. The hours went by, and I fidgeted on my blanket, trying to divert myself. In the end, I simply had to squat on the pot in an undignified fashion, or have an accident. I waited further hours, and after a long while, all my picturing skills faded. I could think of nothing to divert myself. Surely it would be supper time soon. They had to get me out for supper. They couldn't leave me locked up in this tiny room until I starved to death. I listened desperately for the sound of approaching footsteps, but there was just endless silence. I tried singing to make a sound in the room, but my voice sounded too high, too weird, as if I was a crazy girl. I tried to lie down on the blanket, but the floorboards were hard and the blanket smelled stale and musty when I nuzzled into it for comfort. I remembered my long-ago rag baby and started weeping. Once I started, I couldn't stop. I sobbed frantically, but still no one came. "I'm sorry," I shouted. "Please come back, matron. I've learned my lesson now." But she didn't come. It seemed to be getting darker in the small room. Oh my lord, was it evening now? Were they going to keep me locked up all night long? I shouted until my voice cracked, but still nobody came. I threw myself about the attic, kicking and screaming. I tore off my stupid cap and pulled my own hair. It was long again now, in 2 tight plaits, but I undid them and shook my head in despair, my hair wild about my shoulders. I was so thirsty from crying, I could barely swallow. How could they leave me without even a few sips of water? They had to come back soon, or I would surely die. Was that what they really wanted? Oh, dear Lord, what if they never came back? What if I moulded up here in my dark prison forever? What if they waited until I was a grisly skeleton in scraps of brown, crumbling to dust? Then, at long last, when it was getting really dark, I heard footsteps coming along the corridor, and the sound of a key in the lock. "Oh, at last," I said. "I'm so sorry. You will let me out now, won't you?" It was Nurse Macclesfield, one of the senior school staff. She was carrying a bucket and a plate and a mug. "Of course you are sorry, Hetty Feather, and you'll be sorrier still by morning." "What? You're going to keep me locked up here all night?" I said in horror. "You must learn the error of your ways, you wicked girl." She seized my pot, pulling a face of disgust, and emptied it into her bucket. Then she put the plate and mug down on the floor and went to close the door on me again. "No! Oh, Nurse Macclesfield, have pity on me! Let me out!" I tried to cling to her, but she pushed me away. "Don't you dare try to attack me the way you attacked poor Miss Morley. She said you were like a wild beast. It's time you were tamed." She slammed the door shut on me, rattled the key in the lock, and marched off. "Please come back, please, please," I screamed, though I knew she would not relent. At last I drank the water down in 3 great gulps and ate the single slice of dry bread. It was almost pitch dark now, and I hunched up on my blanket. I could not think up a single new story, but old tales from the Police Gazette started swirling in my mind. Mad Flora crouched beside me, knife clutched at the ready. The meat-axe murderer slavered at the door, dripping with blood. I pulled the blanket right over my head, but they crept underneath too. I put my hands over my ears because they were whispering menacingly, threatening me. "Oh, Hetty, are you in there?" Wait, was this a real voice? Outside my attic prison, I heard knocking at my door. "Hetty, have they locked you in there?" I knew that husky voice. "Is it really you, Ida? Oh, dear God, they've really locked you up inside. Ida, please, turn the key and let me out." "I can't, my love. Those witches have taken away the key," she said. She sounded as if she was crying herself. "How long are they going to keep me here?" I asked desperately. "I don't know. I think maybe all night long. I'm so very sorry, Hetty. I only just found out. I didn't see you at dinner, but I thought I'd simply missed you. When I did not see you at supper either, I asked Polly, and she said they'd taken you away to punish you. She was in tears too, poor girl, saying it was all her fault, that you were trying to protect her from Miss Morley. What did you do to her, Hetty?" I snatched her ruler away, and she'd struck Polly. Oh, how I wish I'd struck her with it. I hate her. I hate them all. I hate them too. You must try to be brave, dear. Hetty, they will have to let you out tomorrow. If they don't, I will go to the governor's house and report them for wicked cruelty, Ida said wildly. "I'm not sure I can manage a whole night," I wept. "It's so dreadfully dark, and I'm so scared all by myself." I thought of little Gideon then, all by himself in the squirrel house the night we went to the circus. No wonder he'd been so traumatised. Was I going to be shocked senseless too? "You're not alone, Hetty," said Ida. "I'll stay. I cannot get in, but I'm only the other side of your door. I'll wait until you go to sleep." "But you will get into trouble if they catch you." "They won't catch me. If I hear anyone coming, I'll run down the corridor and hide, and then creep back afterwards. I'm not leaving you here so frightened." "You're so good to me, Ida." "I'd give anything to look after you properly, Hetty. For 2 pins, I'd slap those evil witches until they gave me the key, and then I'd let you out and have you sleep in my own bed. But I have to keep my position. I'd never get any other work without a good reference, and I'm not going to end up in the workhouse. I'll tell you a secret, Hetty. I spent 3 years here, and it was dreadful. A dreadful place. No, I'm doing well for myself now, and I'm saving up my wages. I've the future to think of." She paused for a long moment. "Shall I tell you?" "Tell me what, Ida?" No, maybe not now. Not yet." She was silent. "Are you still there, Ida?" I asked anxiously. "Yes, of course I am. You curl up, my dear, and try to get to sleep. Did they give you a mattress?" I've got a blanket, but it smells so horrid. Put your cap over your nose. That'll smell of fresh laundering and hair oil. Good smells. Now you're the girl for picturing. Picture you're lying on a soft scented pillow, so fresh and dainty, and you've a feather mattress and a beautiful warm quilt. Oh, you're getting so cosy now, aren't you, dear? I didn't think you could picture, Ida. I can do lots of things, Hetty. Just nestle under your splendid quilt. Shut your eyes, dear. You're getting very sleepy. You're going to go fast asleep and have happy dreams. Such happy dreams. One day all your dreams will come true. Hetty, all my dreams too. Ida's voice murmured on, and somehow the stout door splintered away, and we were together, both of us, in our soft feather bed, lying on fresh pillows. Then I woke up with a start. My neck twisted, my whole body aching, locked in the dark all alone. But somehow it wasn't quite as bad as before, because Ida's voice echoed in my head, helping me picture the bed, and after a long time, I fell asleep again. Then I heard the key in the lock. The door opened and I was blinking in daylight. Well, 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 Hetty Feather. Matron Bottomley peered in at me, a look of triumph on her ugly face. You look suitably chastened, child. Are you truly sorry, or do you need another 24 hours to teach you a lesson? I'm very sorry, matron, I said meekly, my head bowed, because I could not stand the thought of further imprisonment. I am glad to see you truly penitent at last, said Matron Bottomley, smiling grimly. I'm pleased that vicious spirit of yours is broken at last. Now perhaps you will show suitable respect to your elders and betters. Oh, how I hated her, talking about me as if I was a tamed wild beast. Of course I wasn't the slightest bit sorry. I'd stuck up for poor Polly. I had no respect whatsoever for Matron Bottomley or Miss Morley. They were undisputedly my elders, but they certainly weren't my betters. They were cruel, wicked women, not fit to look after children. How dare they beat us and lock us up like criminals and act as if it was for our benefit? Chapter 16. I resolved to run away. Oh, Hetty, I will run away too, Polly said, hugging me. Her hands were still sore and scored with red wheels from Miss Morley's ruler, and her eyes were red too, because she'd cried bitterly the entire time I'd been incarcerated. We tried to concoct a sensible plan of action. We fancied ourselves the cleverest girls, but we lacked inventive ideas. We knew so little of the world outside the hospital. We only knew our foster homes, and so we thought of our lost foster mothers. If Miss Morrison knew the way we were treated here, I'm sure she'd take me back into her care. She'd take you too, Hetty, because you're so bright and clever. If Mother knew they kept me locked up in an attic all night, she'd definitely take me back. And my goodness, Jem would rise up and seize Matron Bottomley and kick her up her stinking bottom, I declared. And of course, you could stay with us, Polly. You might care for my brother, Nat, who is almost as dear as Jem, and then you can marry him when we are older and we can live in adjoining cottages. We alternated futures, flying between one household and another, the way we'd pictured our pretend visits as little children. It had been so easy when we were small girls, but now it seemed incredibly difficult. We could fly there in an instant in our imagination, but it was a far harder task working out each step in reality. We had no clear idea how to get to our foster homes. I knew we had to go on a long journey by train, but I did not even know the names of the stations. And though I had little money, Jem's sixpence and my Christmas pennies, I knew they would not be nearly enough to pay the fare. How will we actually get out of the hospital? Said Polly. We rarely set foot outside the grounds. We had been taken to tea at a governor's house several times, and once some girls had been picked to go on an outing to Hampton Court, but not us. We were always carefully guarded, and the grounds were regularly patrolled by staff. Surely, if we simply started running, they would seize us and bring us back. I could not stand the thought of further incarceration in the attic room. We have to make firm plans, I said, though I did not have any idea how to do this. I'd lived in the hospital so long that the outside world had faded like a dream. I'd pictured home often enough, but I'd added so many details that now I wasn't sure what was real. The mother and father in my mind were now like good guardian angels. Yet, contrariwise, I could also remember Mother paddling me, Father shouting angrily. My brothers and sisters seemed like siblings in a storybook, not really connected to me. Martha was now simply the girl in spectacles who sang sweetly in the chapel on Sundays. I even felt I'd lost contact with Gideon. I dared my dressing as a boy trick twice more in the infant school, and last year at the boys' sports day I'd looked hard for him. He eventually spotted me and risked edging closer to say hello. I did not recognise him till he did so. He was so tall now and had filled out a little, seeming less sad and spindly. "Hello, Hetty," he said softly. "Oh, Gideon, it's really you," I said. I did not care about hospital rules. I threw my arms around him. However, it felt odd, as if I was embracing a stranger. We asked each other politely if we were all right, but then stood smiling shyly, at a loss for further conversation. I was so glad he was still talking properly, but I did not like to point this out in case it embarrassed him. Eventually, I asked him if he ever thought of mother and home. Wished I'd held my tongue because his brown eyes grew misty. He shook his head, though I was sure he was lying. Then one of the boys' teachers looked our way and Gideon ran off hastily. I had glimpsed him since, going in and out of the chapel, but was not even sure it was really him. There were so many tall, thin boys with brown eyes. I decided I could not include him in my escape plans. We had been parted too long. It was almost as if he wasn't my brother anymore. There was only one brother I was sure of. My vision of Jem shone like a lantern in my head. I was sure I still knew every freckle on his dear face, every curl of his hair, every curve of his ear. I knew the sound of his sneeze, his yawn, his merry laughter. I felt I could instantly pick him out from 50,000 other boys. He would be almost a man now, able to find work. He could look after me, and Polly too. She was dearer to me now than any of my sisters. She did not give answers, now in Miss Morley's class. She wrote down her sums silently from the board, and if Miss Morley made mistakes, she copied them without comment, though she bit her lip. Alone with me, she talked as usual, but she was quiet with everyone else, her head bent, as if to escape notice. But someone was quite definitely noticing her. A large woman dressed all in black, with a very pale face and dark shadows under her eyes, started coming regularly on Sundays, leaning heavily on the arm of her husband. She wore an enamelled hair locket around her neck and had a habit of rubbing it with her plump white fingers, as if it was a tiny lamp, and she was trying to summon a genie. She didn't seem interested in the tiny girls who usually attracted the most attention. She didn't glance at the capable big girls, almost ready for work. We were used to strange women eyeing them up and down, on the lookout for a useful servant. No, this large lady in black always paused at our table of 10-year-olds and hovered there, blinking her shadowed eyes and fingering her locket. She watched our every mouthful. She strained to hear our whispered remarks. She peered with her large head at an angle, as if she was matron checking the neatness of our plaits and the cleanliness of our necks. The large lady kept looking in our direction, not at me, but at Polly. That lady in black is really starting to annoy me, I grumbled. She will not stop staring. Poke your tongue out at her, Polly. Don't be unkind about her, Hetty. She looks so sad, said Polly. Who do you think she can be? Maybe she's your long-lost mother, who's come back to claim you after all this time. She's rich and respectable now and can afford to buy you back from the governors, I said. I think her husband is a governor, said Polly. I saw him on Friday when the mothers were petitioning. I remember his whiskers and his fat watch chain. Look at the buttons in his waistcoat, all set to pop off. Have you ever seen such a stomach? I said. But he looks a kindly man, said Polly. Perhaps he read her lips, because just then he nodded at her and smiled. Polly smiled back demurely. The lad in black gripped her husband's arm and swayed a little, as if she felt faint. There, she's recognising you. Her little lost Polly, I said, carried away with my story. I started elaborating on my romance, but Polly wasn't listening. She was looking at the couple, and they were looking at her. It was almost as if they were alone in the vast dining room. The hundreds of other foundling girls did not seem to exist, even me. I felt my stomach tighten, so much that I could not finish my Sunday dinner. I was immensely relieved when the table was tapped and it was time to file out. I hurried Polly away from the couple, suggesting we find a quiet corner to read, but Matron Bottomley stood in the doorway. There you are, Polly Renfrew. Come with me to my room, child. Polly gasped. There was only one reason for going to Matron Bottomley's room. It meant that you were going to be severely punished. But Polly hasn't done anything, I said, taking her hand. Did I ask for your comments, Hetty Feather? Said Matron. Hurry along now, if you please. I had to slink away while Polly marched off after Matron Bottomley. She peered back at me anxiously, and I gave her a cheery wave of encouragement, though inside I was in turmoil. I went off to the dormitory and waited by her bed. I waited and waited and waited. Normally, Matron Bottomley was brisk with her punishments. She'd give you a severe talking to. If you'd been exceptionally bad, you were whacked with a stick. I was the only girl so far who'd been locked up in the attic. She surely wouldn't dream of shutting Polly up there. Polly was so scared of the dark. If she woke in the night, she always needed to wake me too, so that I could hold her hand. If she was shut up alone in the attic all night, she'd go demented. I was sure she hadn't done anything wrong at all, though we were all used to being seized indiscriminately and punished for some insignificant or imagined offence. I cast myself down on Polly's bed, beating it with my fist in my frustration. I hate it here. I hate it here. I hate it here, I muttered into Polly's pillow. I shut my eyes tight, picturing myself marching to Matron Bottomley's room and rescuing Polly. But I so dreaded the punishment attic myself, I didn't quite have the courage. I lay there, hating myself as well as the hospital. At long last, I heard Polly's footsteps. I sat up and stared at her. She wasn't flushed and tear-stained. There were no cruel red marks on her hands, yet she looked immeasurably different. She was walking slowly, as if treading water, and her eyes were dazed. She blinked when she saw me. "Oh, Hetty," she said, and her hand went to her mouth. "Oh, Hetty, I hardly know how to tell you." I stood up and faced her. "What is it, Polly?" I'm leaving the hospital," Polly whispered. "What?" I said, shaking my head. "I know, I can scarcely take it in myself, but it's true. I have to gather up my things and go now. I'm to live with Mrs. Macartney. She is the lady in black." Oh, my lord, is she really your mother?" I said. No. She had a daughter our age, called Lucy, but she died of influenza last winter, and now she wants to adopt me, to take Lucy's place. But people aren't allowed to adopt us. We belong to the hospital. I know, but Mr. Macartney is a governor and a very generous benefactor. They will do whatever he wants," said Polly. "And is it what you want?" I asked hoarsely. "Oh, Hetty, I don't know," said Polly, tears suddenly rolling down her cheeks. "I can't bear the thought of not seeing you any more. But of course, I want to leave the hospital." "Do you like them? The Macartneys?" "I think so. They seem very kind, though still very sad. I am to have Lucy's room and all her clothes and even all her toys. She has 5 large china dolls and a doll's house with an entire family of very little dolls. A mother, a father, a grandmother with little spectacles, a grandfather with a grey beard, and 5 children. One, a tiny baby doll in a crochet shawl. It was Mrs. Macartney's when she was a child, and she described it very carefully. She gave it to Lucy, and now it's to be mine." "You're too old for dolls and dolls' houses," I said sourly. "I know, but I don't mind," Polly said. "I mind," I cried. "I mind it all. Oh, Polly, don't go and be that child. Please stay here with me. You're my only friend. I can't bear it at the hospital without you." "I'm so sorry," said Polly, hugging me. "I haven't any choice. Matron Bottomley says I have to go now. But I will beg my new mamma and papa to bring me back here to visit you. And I will write to you lots and lots. Then when we are 14, we can meet up properly because you'll be out of the hospital too." "Yes, but I'll be a servant then," I said. "You will be a lady." "We will still be us, Hetty," said Polly. But we knew there was already a divide between us. I could not mean enough to rebuke Polly further. I knew I would have jumped at the chance of escaping the hospital. I would not have sacrificed that chance for anyone. Not even my dearest friend. But the Macartneys had not chosen me as their new daughter. They had chosen Polly, and I could understand why. She was fair and neat and placid, while I was small and fiery with flame-red hair. She had the table manners of her spinster schoolteacher foster mother. She cut up her food daintily, nibbled slowly and drank from her cup with her little finger stuck out at an elegant angle. I had the manners of a rough country child. I still bolted my food and talked with my mouth full and slurped my milk. Polly's voice was gentle, and she enunciated every word carefully, while I spoke in a wild torrent. Of course they picked Polly. I swallowed hard, trying to compose myself. I kissed her wet cheeks. "I'll miss you sorely, Polly, but I'm also truly happy for you," I said. "I'm sorry I've been so lucky," said Polly, still crying. "I think those Macartneys are lucky to having you for their new daughter," I declared. We hugged again, and then I helped her gather her few possessions. She insisted on taking every present I'd ever given her, even the little squashed heart with huge stitching. Matron Bottomley came marching into the dormitory, rubbing her hands. "Are you ready, Polly dear?" she said, so sickly sweet now that Polly was leaving. "Mr. Macartney's carriage is waiting. What a fortunate girl you are." "I do hope you get to be fortunate too, Hetty," said Polly earnestly, squeezing my hand. "Ha! I doubt anyone will ever come wanting to adopt an imp of a Satan like Hetty Feather," said Matron Bottomley. "Come along now, Polly. You've got a clean cap and tippet on. Still, you'll probably be taking them off the moment you get to your new home. Fancy!" She giggled unpleasantly, smoothing her apron. "You'll tell them how happy you've been here in the hospital, won't you, dear?" "Oh, yes. She's been deliriously happy," I snorted. Matron Bottomley glared at me. "You always have to have the last laugh, miss. But the laugh's on you this time, Hetty Feather. You'll miss your friend badly, I can tell." "We will stay friends, Matron Bottomley," said Polly. I wasn't so sure, and I was right. I waited week after week, desperately hoping that Polly and the Macartneys would attend chapel and then come to observe the grisly public Sunday dinner, but they never once put in an appearance. I had one letter from Polly. It was formal and restrained, because she knew Matron Bottomley would have a good rummage through it before handing it over to me. "My dear Hetty, I miss you very much, but in every other respect I am truly happy. Mamma and Papa are so very kind, and my new life is incredibly comfortable and luxurious. I wish you could come and visit me here. Mamma does not wish to go to the hospital to see you, as she feels it will bring back too many memories. I'm not even called by my own name any more. I am Lucy now. But to you, dear Hetty, I will always remain your very affectionate friend, Polly. I reread her letter many times, but then one Sunday, in a fit of despair, I tore it into tiny shreds. I felt Polly might have tried just a little harder to persuade her new parents to visit the hospital. Could they not take pity on me? It was so dreadful having to live my life without Polly when she had been my dearest friend and constant companion for years. You must try to make a new friend, Hetty, Ida said, patting my shoulder sympathetically as she served our dinner. She was trying to be kind, but her advice was useless. How could I make a new friend? All the girls in my year were comfortably settled in their friendships. I could trail around after this group or that group, but no one really wanted me. Now that I was on my own, Sheila and Monica were especially tormenting. They mocked and mimicked me a dozen times a day. I affected a lofty indifference to their silliness, but I often cried bitterly into my pillow at night. It did not help that I was at such an in-between age. I was not yet one of the big girls with their new chests and their secrets and their infectious giggles. I was not old enough to be a maid to any of the mistresses or nurses, or given any extra responsibilities about the hospital. My life was a dreary routine of the schoolroom and repetitive domestic chores, day after day after day. I did take my turn caring for the newly arrived foundlings, washing their hands and faces of all the little 5-year-olds bawling for their mothers. You would think I would try to be a little mother to them, maybe making one my special baby the way Harriet had long ago cared for me. But I was in such low spirits. I couldn't really feel a fig for any of these puny little girls. I washed them and carted them to the privy, lined them up 2 by 2 to walk to the infants' playground without even bothering to learn their names. Until one day, a brand new foundling girl arrived. She wasn't particularly distinguishable from any of the other girls. Brown eyes, shorn head, scrawny body with a lamentable habit of bursting into floods of tears whenever she thought of home. Do stop crying so, Alicia, I said, wiping her running nose. I cannot help it. And I'm Eliza, not Alicia, she said. I didn't react at all. My brain was sleeping. Her name meant nothing to me, but she was much more alert. Haven't you got those infants ready for bed yet, Hetty Feather? Matron Pig-Faced Peter snapped as she bustled past. Eliza blinked. She rubbed her eyes and then stared at me, suddenly smiling, though her face was still damp with tears and snot. It is you, Hetty. I found you. I stared at her blankly. You're my sister, she declared. The hospital suddenly vanished. I was back in the cottage with Jem, and Mother was there, in the corner, nursing a baby in her arms. Baby Eliza. I clasped her fiercely, and she smiled and squirmed within my embrace. Oh, Eliza, it's so wonderful to find you. Jem said I had brothers and sisters already here, but I was to look most particularly for you, Hetty, said Eliza. Yes, dearest Jem. We have a sister, Martha. You'll be so proud of her when you hear her sing in chapel, but she does not quite remember home the way we do. And we have one lovely brother here, Gideon, but sadly we will not see him often, as the boys are so separate from us. And Saul? Eliza said. Jem taught me Martha who has poorly eyes, Saul who has a poorly leg, Gideon who cannot talk, and Hetty who isn't one bit poorly and talks all the time. Oh, Jem is so wonderful, I declared fervently. Eliza, you must tell me every single thing you can about home, especially everything about Jem. Jem is wonderful, said Eliza. He knows everything. Yes, he does, but he doesn't yet know about Saul. I'm afraid he died several years ago, Eliza. He caught the influenza. Will I catch it? Eliza asked, looking alarmed. Oh, no, you seem a very strong, healthy little girl, and it's summer now anyway. Hetty Feather, get that child into bed this instant, Matron Pigface bellowed. Eliza whimpered at her harsh tone. Don't let her bother you. She's silly old meanie matron, I whispered into Eliza's ear as I hurried her into bed. Don't cry. I'll come and find you later. I shall creep back after lights out. I tucked her up carefully and gave her a quick kiss on her sad little wisps of hair. The other infant foundling stared, and Matron Peters tutted and tossed her head. I went back to my own dormitory feeling light-headed with sudden joy. I whirled around and round, dancing a little jig, flinging out my arms and stamping my boots. Look at Hetty Feather. She's gone totally loopy, said Sheila, tapping her forehead significantly. She's always been loopy, said Monica. My lord, Hetty, I hope you don't fancy your dancing. She started up a stupid imitation. Another time I'd have slapped her, but now I couldn't be bothered. I undressed quickly and got into bed, pulling the covers over my head. I lay in the dark, thinking of my newly found sister. I remembered how scared and lonely I had been when I had come to the hospital at her age, and how baffled to find that Martha scarcely remembered me. I would be such a different sister to little Eliza. I would watch out for her every day, and woe betide anyone who taunted her or stole her Sunday sweets. I would help her with her reading and writing until she was the star of the infants class. I would even help her with her darning because endless practice over the last 5 years had made me an accomplished needlewoman. I would tell Ida that Eliza was my sister. I was sure Ida would give her little treats of butter and sugar too. I would make up stories to entertain her, not lurid adaptations from the Police Gazette. No, I'd tell beautiful stories of princes and palaces, tales where good fairies waved their magic wands, and little foundling girls wore white silk gowns and silver slippers, and went to the ball, and lived happily ever after. I would tell Eliza such a story tonight, I decided. I would be her good fairy sister, waving my wand to make her warm and happy. Perhaps Eliza and I could even run away, back home together. Jem had clearly remained constant. He had told Eliza to look out particularly for me. He was still my own dear Jem, and I loved him with all my heart. I had so many questions for Eliza. How tall was Jem now? How broad were his shoulders? Had his voice broken? Did he still whistle while doing his chores? Did he speak of me often? Had he told Eliza of our plans? I rather wanted him to have kept them secret, but I decided I would not mind too much if he had confided in Eliza. She was such a sweet child. She could come and live with us eventually. I would be like a second mother to her. I waited in a happy fever until all the girls in my dormitory were asleep, and then crept out of bed and tiptoed along to the door. It was so black and eerie out in the corridor that I almost lost heart and scampered back to bed. But I felt ashamed of myself. Great girls of nearly 11 should not be scared of the dark. I forced myself to picture little Eliza sobbing piteously in her infant cot, waiting in vain for me. I could not let her down. I took a deep breath, clenched my fists, and stumbled on into the darkness until I reached the infant dormitory at last. I held my breath as I passed Matron Pigface Peter's room, but I could hear her ugly snorting snores through the door. I pictured her flat on her back, snout quivering, big mouth pursed, and had to clamp my hand over my mouth to stop myself laughing. I crept past her door, down into the infants' dormitory. It was still so dark I could scarcely make out the little iron beds, but alone, let alone their occupants. But I knew the newest foundling slept nearest the door. I listened, and heard muffled sobbing. "Eliza," I whispered. "Oh, Hetty, you've come at last. I'm over here." I felt my way towards her and then hugged her tight. "There now, I told you I would come. Budge over and make room for me. I'm freezing to death." I clambered in beside her. She was very cold herself, but I put my arms right around her and rubbed her little shivery shoulders and arms, and after a minute or so, we both started to warm up. "There now, is that better?" I whispered. "Oh, yes, Hetty, much. Do you know something, Eliza? When I was even smaller than you, I used to jump into our brother Jem's bed and cuddle up close to get warm," I said. "Oh, I did too." I paused. I was astonished. To be truthful, Jem had never cuddled Martha or Saul or Gideon, only me. "Well, Jem is very kindly," I said, a little stiffly, "and I'm sure he wanted to take care of you, Eliza. You must miss him dreadfully. I know I still do. Please tell me all about him and Mother and Father and Rosie and big Eliza and Nat." "Oh, they're all very well," said Eliza. "Mother's hands are sore with the rheumatics, and Father gets fierce sometimes, and my big sister Eliza stays at home to help Mother, and my brother Nat is courting and very silly. I saw him kissing Sally from the village, and she's horrid, with a big fat floppy chest." "Shh, whisper, Eliza. We don't want the others to hear us. Now tell about Jem." I swallowed. "Is he courting?" "Oh, no, not Jem," said Eliza. "He says he's waiting." "He's waiting, is he?" I whispered, my heart pounding under my nightgown. "Oh dear, sweet, faithful Jem," I thought. "I wonder, who's he waiting for?" I asked. "Oh, I know," said Eliza. "Tell me then," I said, scarcely able to speak for excitement. Eliza took a deep breath. "Me," she said, and collapsed into further giggles. "Hush," I said fiercely. "Don't be so silly, Eliza. Tell me who Jem is really waiting for." "Me, me," Eliza chanted. "Yes, but you're only a little girl, and Jem is nearly a man," I said, trying to put her in her place. "I'm still his sweetheart," Eliza declared. "Jem says when I'm quite grown up and can leave this horrid hospital, he'll come and marry me." "What?" "Yes, and I'm to wear a long dress, and Jem will wear a fancy gentleman's suit, and guess where we will live, Hetty?" I did not answer her. I could not speak. I felt as if my heart was being torn in two. "We will live in our squirrel house," Eliza said triumphantly. "No," I mumbled. Yes. We have this squirrel house, Jem and me. It's deep in the woods. It's our secret place, and we have such lovely games there." Eliza prattled on and on. I could scarcely bear it. I put my hands up and covered my ears, but a little mouse squeak echoed inside my head. Jem had shared all our most secret special plans with this silly little child. He had repeated all his promises to her. He had duplicated everything. He had not even bothered to invent new games for her. I bit my lip hard. but I could not stop myself sobbing. Are you crying, Hetty? Eliza asked. Don't be sad. We've each other now, and when we leave here I will ask Jem if he would mind very much you coming to live with us too, as your family. She was doing her best to comfort me, but I had to fight hard not to push the poor little thing out of her own bed. I could not endure it. My dear Jem had betrayed me utterly. No, he wasn't my Jem. He had parroted all his special promises to Eliza, and she innocently triumphed in his attention. He clearly had no intention of keeping his word to her any more than he had to me. He'd just been playing with us, saying sweet things to keep us little girls happy. Oh, how it hurt now to find out he'd been mouthing meaningless nonsense. I crept back to my own bed as soon as Eliza started dozing, but I couldn't sleep. I lay there, crying, my fists clenched. I felt so stupid. I'd believed every word Jem had said. I'd loved him with all my heart. I'd trusted him. I'd been so sure that he really would wait for me. Oh, Jem, how could you repeat everything to her? I whispered into my pillow. You're wicked, wicked, wicked. But as the night wore on, I started to feel I was being ridiculous. Jem hadn't been deliberately unkind. I knew he wasn't really a wicked boy. He was a sweet, kindly soul who simply wanted to comfort his silly little sisters. I could see it was ludicrous for my 5-year-old sister Eliza to talk of Jem as her sweetheart and future husband. It was equally ludicrous for me to think Jem truly wanted to marry me. We'd both been little children. Jem was telling us a fairy story to try to kid us we'd live happily ever after. Of course, he wouldn't marry either of us. He'd remember us both fondly, if a little sadly. Then, in the fullness of time, he'd fall in love with some village lass like Nat Sally and marry her. His future was plain to me, and my future was plain too. I was Hetty Feather, a foundling, imprisoned in the hospital. When I was 14, I'd leave to be a servant. That was all I had to look forward to. I would be a drudge for the rest of my days. And that is where we will leave part 7 of Hetty Feather by Jacqueline Wilson. I'll be back soon with the next part of this fantastic story and lots more stories and videos coming your way very soon. If you'd like to subscribe or hit a like, that's always appreciated. Thanks for listening, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.